Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer and Wellness with Jer. I'm smirking because I was going to do a different intro and I forgot what it was. So, defaulted to the usual. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I like to talk about mental health concepts in pop culture, like songs and movies. We just got through the holiday season here in the United States, and I saw three films in theater. And today we're going to talk about Nosferatu. I saw Wicked with my wife, and then the next day I took my boys and my wife too to see Sonic 3, and then I went and saw Nosferatu by myself. Horror is kind of a new genre to me, like not totally, but for those of you who follow my channel a little bit and know some of what I do, I was raised evangelical Christian, fundamentalist, left the church a number of years ago, but like I really avoided horror, and it's been a really pleasant thing to like engage in it and find some of it. So Nosferatu was sort of the first big like horror film where I was like, "Ooh, I want to go see that in theater." And yeah, and of the three films I saw in theater, this was far and away the best one. So let's jump in and talk about some of the psychological concepts. So Nosferatu is a remake. It's been redone a couple times. I think the OG one came out in the 1920s. That was on Amazon Prime. Don't quote me that it's still on Amazon Prime, but for a while it was. I watched it about a month before the new one came out. So yeah, there's a black and white version that in sort of those old school movie ideas, lots of like someone opens a book and then you get to read the words, and that's sort of how the movies plot along. It's really fun, I think, to like watch those old classic films. One of the first things that I took a class in college. I was a cultural studies minor, and we got to watch Metropolis, and like I was just blown away by it. That came out in like 1927. So the old one is worth a watch, although it's not particularly scary, I would say. So for like a horror genre, like it's not. It's historical and interesting because of that, but I wouldn't say it's like scary. Um, so the new one stars Bill Skarsgård and Lily Rose Depp. Willem Dafoe's in it. Nicholas Holt is in it. Who's the other like up and coming? He's in Craven. Here I got it up. Let me see. Aaron Taylor Johnson also in Craven. I should have gone to see Craven back to back just to get the Aaron Taylor Johnson back to back. I heard Craven was really bad, and I just have a hard time watching the bad Marvel films. The good Marvel films aren't that good to begin with. So, um, but yeah, Nosferatu. Spoilers ahead. I'm bad at that. Short version, spoiler free version is it's good. It's creepy. It's got like a real good historical gothic vibe to it. It's got some fun things to say. If you haven't seen it and you want to, it came out in 1922, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything. But if you're totally unfamiliar, then yeah, stop watching and go watch it because it's good. All right, spoilers ahead. So the film sort of centers around our main protagonist is really played by Depp, which like she's getting a lot of critical acclaim. She does a really good job. I have thoughts on nepo babies and how our entire industry of entertainment is being overtaken by nepo babies, and it's not great being overtaken by nepo babies just because we have the internet. Like it was nepo babies for a long time. Back in the day, they just like changed their names. We're like, look at me, I got famous all on my own, and having intergenerational wealth doesn't change anything. And we know it does, which is why we're skeptical of nepo babies. So Lily Rose Depp is Johnny Depp's daughter. Um, like a French actress, maybe is her mom. Don't quote me on that. I'm not real up on my Johnny Depp background knowledge. But she plays Ellen Hutter. So the and she's the main character when you look at the story as like she's the main character. I don't think people would fight me on that. But she's recently married to her partner, who is a real estate agent, or like he's working on it. I don't know the ins and outs of the 1920s and getting a home. It seems all very off-putting and like real hierarchical. Like he's the man, so that's good, and this is his big break. But also like just the whole way, like I don't know, his boss is a member of the occult and goes crazy, and it's the whole thing. Um, but so he travels off to Transylvania to sell someone a house, Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, and like Bill Skarsgård is also phenomenal in this film. I think people just sort of expected it because he's done so many creepy things, and he's very good at like making his body be eerie and uncomfortable. So he's phenomenal in it. So the interplay there between Lily Rose Depp and Bill Skarsgård is fantastic. Really fun to watch, just really well. Like it's a beautiful movie. It's shot well. The edits are just like it's just a gorgeous sort of dark gothic film. If you can like be into people bleeding out of their eyes and think it's beautiful still. Um, so anyway, Thomas is selling a house. It's very creepy and off-putting. He goes through the woods on this long journey, and there's lots of creepy things that happen there. And his wife has basically been possessed since she was a child by these dark visions and hysteria, the wandering womb of it all. And because we learn like that Count Orlok has been in her mind, he wants to eat her, is what's going on there. And as just like a straight up vampire film, you can sort of watch it and enjoy it as like the creeping horror. The plague comes as Count Orlok arrives into a city because he brings along some coffins. He has to sleep in a coffin. He has to sleep in the dirt where he was buried, and so he brings a bunch of dirt with him. The rats are eating it, and the plague gets out, and real hysteria, not just making fun of women and locking them into institutions hysteria, but like mass hysteria takes over because of the plague. And it's just a very interesting film, sort of straight up, like without reading into it a ton. Which I don't know. I'm gonna guess a lot of people watch vampire films that way. It's fun. Like there's some catharsis we know as a psychological concept. Like people who listen to metal are generally happier than other people. There's a catharsis in confronting our own mortality. There's a catharsis in being real, not just like venting and getting it out, but being real and acknowledging that like we will die, that bad things happen, the universe is chaos, and like we shouldn't be alive at all. So like there's, I think the horror genre scratches that itch. I think in times of uncertainty, another Trump presidency, just general shift across the world towards authoritarian governments. People are scared. Climate change is scary. The economies are collapsing. We have multiple generations of people being like, "This system sucks. Why do we keep doing it this way? It's all made up. Let's just make up a better way." So like I'm here for it, right? Like let's yep, burn it down, start over. It's stupid the way we're doing things, and the dumbest people are in charge. So yeah, I think like that's interesting. I thought the plague aspect of this film would be more bothersome, just coming out of a global pandemic not that long ago. It wasn't. I think it does a good job as a period piece of being like, and this is what it would have been like in the 1920s. So I think there's like some disconnect there. It didn't really trigger anything. I don't know. I haven't read a ton of reviews that are like, ugh, the plague, really? We just got out of COVID. Come on. So I don't really see any issue with that. But yeah, so there's catharsis in confronting death. There's catharsis in like our fear of the dark, of unexplainable or uncontrollable things like plagues, weather catastrophe, stuff like that. And we need an outlet for that. So I brought up metal music because that's pretty well researched that like that actually really helps people. Horror as a genre is trending really well. I'm a comic book nerd for those of you again who follow my channel. The six of you who watch my reviews of comic books. Uh, where like horror is having a nice moment in like comic book sales and storytelling. Horror is always sort of a subgenre. It's not for everyone, but again, like I think it's more and more people are engaging with it because we need sort of that outlet. The Twilight Zone was big in the '60s. We have Black Mirror, blanked for a second there. Black Mirror is the more recent updated version of that. And so our brain sort of needs an outlet for these deep, dark things, these existential dread type things. Horror can be a I had fun at this movie, a fun way to sort of express some of that and process some of that, I think, in a healthy way. So yeah, I think just like up front, it's a fun movie. It's good. It's beautiful. It's dark and haunting in certain ways. Like not like haunting, like you're gonna lose sleep, but like there's shots, there's imagery that will probably remain, and it's just yeah, well acted and all that stuff. What are some of the deeper themes? I think the psychology behind a lot of it is like fear. What does fear do to us? And hysteria, and there's sort of, because it's a historical piece, um, like it's fiction, but it's set at a different historical time. I think there's so much that goes on in how mental health was handled. So hysteria, yes. Fear, what does it drive us to? Our fear of the occult, our fear of not being seen as pure or part of the in group, our fear of our animalistic selves, our deeper, darker desires, the shadow. If you want to be either someone who's throwing away their money to shystery salesman, snake oil salesman, or a Carl Jung fan, one or the other. Carl Jung, probably a shystery snake oil salesman. Two, I'll throw shade at my own profession. We can do better than Freud's first generation students. But yeah, I mean, fear is a big part of this. We have Ellen Hutter's fear. We have Thomas Hutter's fear of Count Orlok. He's sort of like personalizes. He really like blacks out and sort of blocks out these traumatic things that happen. He has like a flashback in the woods, or like, was it real? Did he dream it? Did he block it out? And his boots are muddy. So like obviously he saw this horrific stuff happen in the woods. So like he's just blocking it out. That's a common trauma response, sort of that freeze response we see in him over and over and over again. And then Ellen's, she's was hysterical as a child. They medicated her, medicated her. So who knows what level of opium's just in her system at any given point. As a child, as an adult, she starts having these horrific nightmares. She's convulsing, she's sweating, she's screaming. So they just like strap her to the bed. And again, so this idea of like hysteria is there throughout the movie, but because it's in a historical content, content's not the word. Because it's in a historical construct. There we go. We have to look at hysteria as how it was treated then, and it was strap someone to the bed. It was tranquilize them, and we like to be like, we're so much more modern, and we handle these things way better. We shut down most of the institutions, but like at some point, we still do this. You go to a psych ward, like these are people who are having major breaks with reality, and at some point you do tranquilize them. At some point you do have to restrain them so they don't harm themselves or other people, most likely themselves, and just far and away statistics and percentages that they will be a harm to themselves. But yeah, the brain is a scary place when it is not in touch with reality, when you're experiencing something no one else is experiencing, when some of the wiring gets crisscrossed in our brain, and something that maybe shouldn't be a threat or is a mild threat gets taken as a traumatic level threat. So I think it's interesting in that level, but also because we have the historical construct in this film that like, yeah, we didn't do that well. She was dismissed and then considered crazy and belittled for both of those things just because she was a woman. Where Thomas doesn't have any of that, and he experiences a lot of the same fear and handles it worse. To be honest, like he just sort of blanks out on it. She tries to help people and warn people. Again, she's as she becomes aware that like this isn't that I'm crazy, this isn't that I'm having bad dreams, this is a real threat. It's coming closer. We know that Thomas has confirmed some of my fears, and like she's still just ignored and a crazy person, except for Willem Dafoe's character, who's like a disgraced doctor because he gets into the occult. And again, I don't want to be like this movie's about COVID because it's not. But it is interesting this back and forth sort of between like what's pure and what isn't, what's natural and what isn't, what's religion and what isn't, what's moral or ethical and what isn't. The film teases around sort of these concepts of like, where do we get our ideas on morality from? Where do we get our ethics from? Is it inside of us or is it from external forces? And the film sort of refuses to answer that question, which is fine. Um, Makes it a good movie that it's open to interpretation. Here I am talking about it. So I think it does a good job with that. But like he's a disgraced doctor who gets too caught up into the occult. And again, I think it didn't trigger this in the moment while I was watching it, but like running it back in my head and prepping to talk about it. Sort of this idea of like, yeah, where like when science fails us, and not because science has failed us, but our understanding of the world around us, doesn't fit into what we know about science. We do like veer into the occult or the conspiracy theories, and science maintains. So right, like the other doctor in the film, who doesn't veer into all this occult stuff, is saying like, well, that's not like how we would do it. It's not something we can replicate in the lab. That's not how I would treat any of my other patients. And yet, because I don't have this answer, we're going to give this a shot. And like in a vampire film, the doctor who's into the occult ends up being correct. In the real world, there aren't vampires. And so, you're taking this as a metaphor. But like, I think the real horror in the film is really how Ellen is treated, and also like, uh, as I think a metaphor for the way that women have to deal with a constant fear of men, and that in the end, like even though it's terrible and horrible and awful, she has to sort of invite the vampire in and deal with it to like get through the threat. Like, yeah, I think for just thinking about abuse, of any kind, but specifically sexual abuse, like it's a horrific film in the sense that like she is in love with her husband and is like, nope, I gotta have sex with this vampire and he's gonna eat me so that both, yeah, gonna eat me, and that way he will die, and I can sacrifice myself to save other people. And like that's sort of that heroic thing, but like it's gross how we get there, and it's also gross that like, yeah, this is how it works with people when there are hierarchical differences and there are different power structures, and men are protected. Like we just elected a rapist. What message does that send to people who have been victims of sexual assault? That like you're not safe. He first brought up putting a Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General, Matt Gaetz, who also a rapist, like a pedophile, right? So not great, and like Trump's a pedophile too, allegedly, but like all over the Epstein stuff. Best friends with Epstein. We have a really horrific read on how he allegedly raped a 13-year-old with Epstein. Like he's gross, and the fact that like we're gonna say, hey, how dare women, we as males, I'm not saying this, I'm saying culturally, but like men get all bent out of shape. Like, of course, I'm more safe to meet in the woods than a bear. What is this thing all about? And get all bent out of shape. But I'm just saying, like, nah, men aren't safe. Like, that's the whole thing. It's like when we're having to assess our risk, that's what this is. And the film, as somebody who works with survivors of domestic violence, for people who are in abusive relationships, who've gotten out of abusive relationships, like this mentality of like, I have to go along to mitigate the danger and potentially protect other people, whether it's other kids or other victims, whatever that might be. Like it really is this twisted sort of mindset, and it's hard to break out of that. And so watching the film sort of play with this, like it's not consensual, and yet she is making an intentional choice to allow this to happen because that's the only way that vampire magic works. Um, it's really yucky and gross. And like that to me is like the horror of it. The film does not shy away from nudity and sexuality. I think there's other parts of it where, like, again, obviously, Count Orlok, the vampire, is a monster, but like Ellen is sort of framed as being crazy because she's like sexual. Her husband is weird with her own desires. Like he's allowed to have desires, but she shouldn't. She's supposed to be chaste and pure or whatever. So like there's a lot of messaging around like women only ever get to be the blame, which I think is valid. Like I think that's a valid message that like, yep, this is another horrific thing that women have to deal with. It'd be interesting. This is me saying this in real time. I haven't thought through this yet. Be interesting for like a woman to direct a movie like this, and see what that feels like. I think it's the metaphors there. I don't think it needs to be like super super heavy or heavy handed, but yeah, there's also the reality that like a dude made this movie. So yeah, I don't know what the original was. I didn't read anything that was like horrific, but I'm coming at it from a place of like cultural studies minor in college, reading H.P. Lovecraft books for the first time. Again, just super sheltered as a child. So first time I'm reading Lovecraft is I'm 19 years old, taking a monsters, robots, and aliens class in college, and like I read it as just a straight horror film or a horror story. We read At the Mountains of Madness, and it was like, oh yeah, and then like these creepy blobs that are really hard to like explain away or make sense of are really bothersome to the brain. And we went to class, and everybody was like, racism, right? And I was like, did I read the wrong book? And so I don't know what like that early metaphor for the. I know Nosferatu is like a movie retelling of Dracula. I understand that. But like some of the creeping metaphor, like the shadow that Nosferatu casts on the wall, and the way the movie updates that, I really actually liked because it wasn't cheesy and it was eerie without being like hokey, which it could have just been hokey. The 1922 version's hokey, but like I think it was done really well where like there's a creeping sense of dread. The dread escalates throughout the movie. There's some jump scares, there's some other stuff, horror stuff, some grotesque plague deaths. But I think the horror is like sort of that creeping eeriness, that sort of like impending doom that at some point you can't run from and you just have to turn towards and let it happen. Like, eek. And in the sense of abuse, that's gross. But like in the sense of just like, yeah, we're all gonna die someday, or like climate change is gonna get us all. There's wildfires ravaging LA right now. Like, yeah, it's brutal, and death comes to us all. Hopefully not by Bill Skarsgård having sex with us and eating our hearts out simultaneously. The the remake of it is what a fun way to end. The remake of it is interesting just because it's like it is different than some of the other vampire stuff. Like he's not biting her neck; he's like really sucking the blood right out of the heart directly. Um, so that's interesting. It seems this is where, as far as I could tell in my brief research for this, I'm not like a film critic. I'm still psychology is still my day job. But like that, this seems to be the sticking with like sort of vampires can't handle daylight and then they burst into flames. Like he didn't dissipate. There was no, nonsense. He just sort of dies. So yeah, but I really liked it. Like I thought it was fun. I think it's interesting away from like all the political nonsense. Like I do think climate change is a very real and valid threat for all of us, for humanity. Um, but on a day-to-day basis, when there isn't some major climate crisis going on, like we don't have a ton of threats. Most of us aren't dealing with like predators, you know, tracking us. I guess the point of the story is that women are, and so I can't just say that. But like we're not like having to double check like when we go outside of our house if there's a velociraptor or a saber-toothed tiger out there. Like we're safe. We get in these cars that travel at 65 miles an hour, and that doesn't trigger the alarm that it should in our brains. So our brains have really been rewired for how it assesses anxiety. And I think then it's interesting to sit down in a theater with people who are also saying, like, yeah, let's be scared together for a while. And again, I think that's fun. I will say on movie etiquette, um, I'm sort I have strong opinions on movies, and how to watch them. So in a theater, right? Like turn your phone off. Don't take it out. Don't have it ruining the screen effect. But I saw it at a new theater when it first came out, and so like the loungers, they're big leather. They're kind of like a love seat. You can recline them. It's nice. There's something to be said for old, beautiful theaters. Definitely see films in your old local theaters. But the new ones, so you basically like are getting a love seat. Since my wife didn't want to go see this film, and I don't have other people who are into horror, I just got one seat. So their seat's technically open, but it's like, don't sit there. And somebody bought the one in my little pod with me and was sitting there. And so like I sat in a seat that I didn't buy because I want my space. That's why, I did sit in the middle of the theater, the right height, in the center of the screen. So I understand that I had a premium seat, but like I got my ticket the day before. The theater was not packed. Don't sit by someone if you could sit in an open spot that isn't right next to someone. Or in another pod, right? You don't have to be 12 feet away from everyone. So yeah, that threw me off a bit. It's like, why did they sit there? And they weren't with the people on the other pod next to them because those people left and this person still stayed there. So like just a solo dude who's like, I'm gonna sit next to this other person in this horror film. Don't do that. If it's a full theater and everyone's jam packed, I get it. But in an open theater, take an open seat. Come on, people. Um, yes, Nosferatu, really good. Robert Eggers is the director. He did The Lighthouse. He did The Witch, right? So maybe I'll do a review of that. I recently saw that film, but it's also coming up at the local part of Milwaukee Film is showing a bunch of great independent films, and that's got a lot of good themes of religious trauma. Nosferatu, like again, it just sort of beat around the bush of like its ethics, its morality. So I think there's some stuff about religious trauma, but nothing that like really stuck with me. It just sort of was like, think about where our ethics come from, and we're not going to answer that question. And I think just a vampire film is maybe not the barometer of your ethics and morality anyway. Like at some point, it's just like, yeah, it's a monster flick. Uh, but really good. I think definitely worth like watching if you can stomach it, because it's just like a gorgeous film. Um, the artistic, the aesthetics of this film are worth watching on its own. And then it's, a good enough story on top of it. It's very well done, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, Nosferatu. Probably more horror coming up if you are interested. Like I said, I watched The Witch and I'll watch it again soon before I do a review of it. What was that Hugh Grant film that just it's not streaming yet, but I didn't catch in theater? The I forget. Anyway, I'm on board for horror, so probably more of that. If there's something you would like me to review, drop down in the comments. I've done a couple of reviews of Tool songs that get a lot of traction. I would love, love, love to do more Tool songs and also other things other than just Tool songs. Somebody was like, I just subscribed. Will you do this song? 100%. I'm doing their song because, yeah, I'm a small YouTube channel trying to put out good content on psychology and mental health that is at least interesting to watch. So if there's something you would like, drop down in the comments, like, subscribe. All that stuff helps. I'm not algorithm friendly, so all your help is helpful. That being said, thanks for stopping by and spending some time with me today. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.